Good day, colleagues. I want to thank Ruvasa for inviting me to this workshop. What I want to contribute to this workshop is just a few practical steps, very specific practical steps in the Brucella control program that we can possibly use to get it off the ground. In Veterinarian Network, we strive to be very practical, to keep our communication with veterinarians going through the disease reporting system. And in that same way, I want to use the same system to get veterinarians involved and informed on a continuous basis about the Brucella control steps that we're taking. Let's use the acronym that's been used in this whole control program, and that is vaccinate, educate, test, and slaughter. So this whole program basically gives us a very easy acronym, but we still need to stay practical. And practical in the sense that for each of those, we have to set up some systems and plans to make sure that we do a start to this program, and it's not only a major big policy that's not been rolled out on the ground level. Let's start with vaccinate. If you think about vaccination, the most important thing with vaccination is that the vaccine must be available. We know that when we do vaccinate heifer calves, they must be vaccinated between 3 and 8 months of age. And that means during that part of the year when calves are born, in our beef cattle herds, it's very seasonal. The vaccine must be available. So one of the first steps is we must ensure from OBP side that vaccine is available. And if vaccine is not available, we must ensure that there's another source of this vaccine. And I think those steps are currently in place to look at that and make sure that we don't miss that opportunity, because once you miss that opportunity, you can't go back specifically with this vaccine. The same with education. If we talk about education, we must become very practical. We need to set up material that can be used by veterinarians, by animal health technicians, by state veterinarians in the field at different venues and where farmers get together, and or use it on some platforms like WhatsApp. So a PowerPoint presentation on education is very necessary, as well as some videos. Farmers nowadays, they do tend to get influenced by 5 to 10 minutes videos. We can distribute it very easily through WhatsApp groups, and it can be very practical and to the point. But there's a further step there. If we do the education, we even have to keep a record of that. That at the end of the day, that we know along the way we're making progress. It's not just education. It's education with a specific plan in place. If we then look at testing, and that's where veterinarians mostly play a vital role. If we look at testing, we must make sure that we develop also milestones. And my first milestone is basically a database of everybody in the field that's registered and can test for Brucella. From our point, from private veterinarians' point of view, we're setting up a database of all veterinarians that do currently do Brucella testing. That is something that needs to be in place. It's not something that we can talk about. Currently, with our survey with the veterinarians, we've got about 50 practices that have replied to the survey that we're putting on the database. And those 50 veterinary practices are the ones that we will be using and going forward with this. But we're also going to expand it. And by the end of October, we actually want to involve all the 200 plus practices in the country, just to ensure that we have a starting point from our side. There's also a survey currently being developed by the dairy industry. Dr. Chris van Dijk, who's chairing this meeting, is doing that and can give more feedback on that. And we also had a lot of feedback from the farmers so far. The development of a register for laboratories is the other minimum database that we need. We need to have a database of laboratories, their capacity, their cost, their contact details, and their turnaround time. How long do it take for them to give us feedback? Because when we start testing for Brucella, all of those things are very, very important in this whole setup. We need to be able to have labs there. It's usually the bottleneck. It's currently the bottleneck. And we need to have that database totally up and running for the start of this project. Lastly, we also need to interpret the results of the tests. Now, there's a lot of veterinarians that's not totally averse in interpretation, or sometimes there's tricky situations. So the further thing that we need to have in place is a support panel that can support veterinarians where there's questions in interpreting the results of brucella testing, especially if we start eradicating it in a herd and we get to the stages where we have a low prevalence in the herd or low incidence in the herd, and now we have to make tough decisions about slaughtering of cattle and going forward. So a support panel for helping veterinarians to interpret the results is also very necessary. Then we get to slaughter, the last part of the acronym. And here again, it sounds in many cases that's a very simple function, but it's not. There used to be a register of all abattoirs that do slaughtering under Red Cross permits, and there's not currently one available. We have to set that database up again, because when you test as a veterinarian and you identify positive animals and they get branded, you want to get them off the farm as quickly as possible. And now you can't phone around and try to find the abattoir that is equipped to do slaughtering under Red Cross. You need to have a database of that. Is one of the functions of the state that need to be updated, and that must be available. Otherwise, you can't get rid of that animals as quickly as possible in your eradication program. The last part that I just want to allude to is a project that we're currently doing from a veterinarian network side, and we call it vplan. And it's basically a whole system to identify farmers who already use veterinarians in a herd health program, where veterinarians at least visit the farm once a year, have developed the herd health program for that farm. We call that nominated veterinarians. And that farmer is currently testing for brucella and most probably the venereal diseases as well. So in our mind, it's also a very, very practical first step to start this whole program. And that is to identify farmers, and in most cases it will be dairy farmers and stud beef cattle farmers that already use the veterinarian in testing. We need to give those farmers, we need to lift them out and say, this is what we strive to. In many cases in today's world, we can't just use legislation to get a program off the ground. We need to have some positive influence on farmers and say, this is farmers that's already doing the right thing, and we have to appreciate that and we have to highlight that in order to get other farmers to buy in. So I just want to thank Rubasa again for this opportunity, and this is just a few specific practical points that I thought of in starting this program, and I think we can do more discussions around this now in the next session of where do we start and what timelines do we put down to really get this brucella control program off the ground. I want to thank you.